together. So the threshing crew in all through the Midwest with some money for the colonies, and he was a big hero because he had done this, and so all the girls were giving him all kinds of attention, and he took his pick.
What's a threshing hold?
A threshing machine.
Uh-huh.
It's not a threshing hold, it's a threshing machine. It cuts the wheat, runs it through it's not it is a threshing machine. It cuts the wheat, knocks the grain off, puts them in a pile, and then shoots them into a wagon.
Oh, cool. What's Amelia like? Well, what was she like that you heard stories of?
Can you shut that thing off for a minute?
Uh-huh.
Is it shut off? Okay, this one is my mother here, and this is also her with Dad Richard on this. By today's standards, my mother Amelia was a little on the plump side, but by the standards of her day, she was an absolute beauty. And this is just the way they dressed in those days. Okay?
Okay. Did I push it? I didn't
Now what?
push it. Hold on. Fading out. Okay.
Okay. I don't know where Richard and Amelia were married. I suspect in the Salt Lake Temple. They could have been married down in Mexico because at that time they were doing marriages down there. There was general authority there when that happened.
How many kids did they have?
5, 6.
So your oldest?
3 of them died while children. Richard was the oldest one that I knew. Richard died in the Second World War. He was a Marine medic. Well, let's put it this way for those who are purists. He was a Navy medic assigned to the Marines, so he wore a Marine uniform on that. And they were being attacked by the Japanese with artillery fire. And being a medic, he needed some water for his patients, the people who were injured. So he crawled through the fire, the artillery fire, down to the water, got the water, brought the water almost back to where they were, and when a chance artillery shell from the Japanese uprooted the tree, and the tree fell on him and killed him. They were able to get the water for the Navy, for the injured Marines.
Did you tell them where this was?
The camera's on.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, New Guinea. It was in New Guinea. There was, the Australians were leading a charge up the side of the mountain. They're supposed to be leading a charge, but in reality there was a battalion of Marines in front of the Australians. And this was the ones. They succeeded, incidentally, in driving the Japanese clear down to Port Moresby on the other side, and then driving them right off the island. But I got this information from a letter sent to the family by Richard's Marine battalion commander. LeVer was the second brother, who was 3 years older than me, and he was a naval radio man. He never actually got under fire. And then I was the third one. There were just 3 of us when I was old enough to understand what was going on. I got into the Army and the engineers. Now, what else was it you wanted?
Your siblings that,
The rest of them had died by the time that I came along.
so you're the youngest of,
I'm the
I mean,
youngest of that family.
how did your mom die?
There are several stories. I saw a letter from the Mexican government in which the Mexican doctor who did the autopsy said she died of rigor mortis, which is a little bit odd. Even people who aren't doctors know that people don't die of rigor mortis. My aunt, or my stepmother, Anna, said that Amelia died of food poisoning from what she thought was a bad bottle of string beans. Vegetables are much harder to keep safe from going bad than fruits, because fruits have all that sugar in them, and that kills everything.
So how did Anna and Ivans come to take care of you?
Well, when my mother died, I was about 5 or 6 months old. My father, Richard, was the foreman of a railroad gang, a gang that was building the road bed for a railroad going across New Mexico. If you've ever been there, that's the most godforsaken place you've ever seen. Matter of fact, there's a town there called Lordsburg, and a local resident said to me the reason they called it Lordsburg is because they figured that nobody but the Lord would have it. It was that sort of situation. I was having some trouble. I was sick, and about 6 months old, and Dad Richard couldn't take care of me out there in the middle of the desert where the older kids were old enough to be taken care of. Okay, so I was staying in Mexico, in Colonial Juarez, with my grandparents on the Walser side. And there were no doctors down there that were worth having. And so Ivans and Anna prayed about it, and Mama says that she received a vision from my mother telling her, Anna, take care of my baby. Anna and Ivans then approached Richard, and it's my private opinion that Richard also had the same vision that Anna had, or a similar one to that, because he didn't put up any fight at all about it. It was uncharacteristic of Richard. He kept hold of what was his. So I went to live with Ivans and Anna, who lived in a town called Safford, where he was teaching junior college.
Down in Arizona?
Down in Arizona, Safford, Arizona. That's the same hometown that President Kimball came from.
Well, he was your bishop, no?
No, he was our state president.
Your state president.
By the time I was old enough to understand it, he was state president. He had been bishop, yes. At any rate, they took care of me, and even though Dad Richard married later on to Olita Gladney, I stayed with Ivans and Anna.
So do you have other brothers and sisters?
Well, when Dad Richard married Olita Gladney, he had 3 children. Valentine, Katru comes first. Katru comes first, and then Valentine, and then Joseph. Since there were several other Josephs in the family, we called him Little Joe because he was only about 6 feet tall. The other Josephs were considerably taller on that. Okay, now Ivans and Anna, after I came to them, had 3 more children. They had Laurel, and they had Israel Ivan, no, I'm sorry. Anyway, Joseph Ivans. We called him Ivans at first, but when Ivans went on his mission, the Spanish couldn't pronounce Ivans, so they called him Joe, and that's what he's been called ever since. So he's the next one, and then Frank. Laurel died while he was in high school with cancer of the bone. Ivans and Frank at this point are still running around good and strong. Okay, and LeBur is my only living full brother, but we all run around together as though we were all brothers. Okay.
What was the what was your mission like? Where did you go?
Well, I was rather disappointed. I was the only one in the family who didn't go to a Spanish-speaking mission. However, I think the decision on the part of the brethren was a good decision, since I couldn't speak Spanish. The only one that can't, by the way, on this. You're a very, very bad boy in that respect. I should have learned Spanish, but I didn't. I went to Northern California Mission. That time it went from Sanger, which is just north of Bakersfield, up to Medford, Oregon. And that was the mission that we were in.
What was your first area?
Our first area was Visalia, California. A place that you're getting acquainted with.
Yeah.
We had we bought a church from somebody else. It was a rather large wooden church. It's probably doesn't even exist anymore, I would guess, in Visalia. But, and that's where I spent the first part of my mission. Somehow or other, when I was there, though, I got what the local doctors called San Joaquin Valley fever. And so I had to spend a month recuperating from that, after which I absolutely insisted that I wanted to go back to my mission, so they sent me back. When I arrived, I spent a month in the mission office, and then I went to Medford, Oregon. The mission president said that's as far away as we can get you from the San Joaquin Valley. So I went up there and had some very interesting times, but I don't think this is the place well, whatever you want.
Sure, tell them.
Talk about that. Well, I went to Medford because we were doing city directories at that time. This was right after the Second World War, and there were actually still people in California that thought Mormons had horns. We all wore hats, which was kind of unusual for young men, and so the story went around that some prankster said, well, they do that to hide their horns. They wear those hats. And I actually had a couple of people ask me to take my hat off, which I did, and they were a little disappointed because there were no horns there. I had hair then. But anyway, where was I? I got lost.
You're talking about the city directories.
Oh, yes. So this elder who was in charge of starting a directory in Medford had worked with me in the San Joaquin Valley and knew that I was a good artist and a few other things that I could do, and a good talker, as he put it. And he wanted me to go up there with him to run the advertising department. So he sent me up there. They were still a little afraid of my help, and so they paired me together with another young elder who was an extremely good artist. I mean, this guy was a real pro. I was just an amateur at the thing, but paired me with him, and we were supposed to tract around out in the country to get the good, healthy air in the middle of the summer at the time. And so we went around there, and just quite by accident, Elder Miller and I ended up tracking without Purser script for 3 weeks and didn't even know we were doing it. We tracked it all the area around the member's house where we were staying, and then we said to him, "Where do we go now?" And he says, "Well, you can go up this road." Says it goes clear over to Klamath, and there's a lot of houses along it, and we've got some church members there who will be happy to put you up whenever you need it. And they were conveniently spaced about every 10 miles along the road. So that's what we did. We went tracking out this road. We both had briefcases with about 5 Book of Mormons each, 2 pair of garments, and about 4 pair of socks, and another white shirt. And we went for 3 weeks without ever coming back, because every time we'd get to in the evening, the local member would come tracking us down to make sure that we made it to their house. And sometimes we ate 4 meals a day, which for young men were, and we had more cottage meetings than we ever had before or since. Every place we went, it got to be a popular thing along this road. Popular thing to have the elders come and preach. So if we missed a house, we were going along the road and there was a house back up in the pine trees there, they'd come and get us. Say, "Hey elders, you missed us. Now come on up to our place. We've got dinner for you, or lunch for you, or something like that." And it was really quite fun. We never had any hardship, never missed a meal, always had a nice bed to sleep. Well, some beds were nicer than others. When I met with the branch president for that area, it was Gold Hill is what it was called, about 10 years later, he said they had a whole ward out there. So we apparently did a lot of good. If nothing else, we reactivated other church members. Then Elder Gray came and got me, got the 2 of us, brought us back to start the advertising department. So we put out a city directory in the city of Medford by contacting every house in the city of Medford, asking them, getting the names of the family and their occupations and things like that. And then we asked them about what religion they preferred. We had permission of the local elders to do, the local ministers to do that, which was very convenient for us because that gives us a chance to talk about the Mormon church. And it really worked. Everybody was talking about the Mormon church in Medford before we left. And there are at least 2 stakes. I think there are 3 stakes in that valley now.
Wonderful.
Stakes.
That's neat.
Yeah. But
what was your next area?
my next area is they brought me to the Bay Area. And after being here about 3 months, I paired up with another elder that was older than I was, and we became the traveling elders in the supervising elders in the Bay Area. Well, not the Bay Area, the East Bay Area. Walnut Creek, Oakland, San Leandro, clear up to Rodeo, that whole corner there, Contra Costa and Alameda counties on this. And we had a car and we visited the elders, and I can still remember when I drive along some of those roads in that area that have houses all over, off tracking with a brand new elder, training him, going through Concord grape vines on both sides. And one of the things I remember is that I was walking with this elder going grapevines on both sides, and you could see farmhouses about every quarter of a mile on one side or the other, and we were visiting them. But we were going down this road, and there were grapevines on both sides with great big Concord grapes, big ones, like that. And the young elder that I was with kept looking at them, and I'd shake my head and say no. So we'd go along a little while longer, and he'd look again, and I'd say no. And about the third time I did that, a voice from down in the grape says, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, let him have one." It was the farmer back in his grapes doing something with it, and he gave us this great big bunch of Concord grapes. After we'd gone a couple of miles, we were so tired of those grapes. I mean, they're delicious, but they were so big that we finally left it on the side of the road. Yeah.
Wasn't there a story that you had about meeting a family that didn't speak English?
Yes, that's kind of a long story, though.
Okay, we'll keep going then. And when you got home off your mission, how did you meet Barbara?
Well, I knew Barbara before I left on the mission. Matter of fact, I was engaged to her.
Oh, so you're an engaged missionary.
Yeah, and she sent me back a ring.
Oh.
But while I was in the hospital recuperating from the San Joaquin Valley fever, why I talked her into taking it back. I have mixed feelings about my having done that, but we'll leave that alone for right now. Do you want to know what happened after I came off my mission?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got married, obviously.
Well, I came home around the middle of July and was going to start at the University of Utah in the fall. And so I had a chance to work, so I went over to El Paso and worked in construction. Got quite a bit of money because I was able to earn a lot more money in construction than I would be working in a retail store or something like that, or in an office. Got quite a bit of money and courted Barbara. And finally we decided to get married, and we did. And then we went to Utah, to the University of Utah.
And how many children did you have?
Barbara and I had 5 children. Well, it wasn't a particularly happy ending, unfortunately.
Well, tell us about your 5 children. Your first 5.
I have to be careful how I say this because I may not use the right words, but Barbara and her family were afflicted with what I would describe as severe depression and some things like that. Some of them, I mean, almost all of the women in the family, including my 3 girls, were afflicted with it with a certain degree. Barbara had it real bad. And I just didn't know how to handle this kind of problem. Basically what it amounted to, after 5 children, she decided she'd had enough on this thing. And she was having severe depressions, and the doctor suggested to her that she go to work and have the kids taken care of during the day. It's 5 of them. And the very next Sunday, General Authority talked in conference and preached loudly against working mothers. And I talked her out of working because I figured that wasn't what the Lord wanted. But as it turns out, that probably would have been the solution to the problem she had, is to get her out where she can have a chance to think. But anyway, the whole thing ended in a divorce.
Tell us about your 5 kids.
Well, there's Amy, just as solid a cute little blonde as you would ever want to know. And then the next one was William. He's in Montana right now. with his children. And then there was April, and she was what I would describe as the house mother. I don't know whether she'd be offended by that term, but the rest of the kids would agree with it. She just sort of mothered everybody. And then there was Laura, and then Clifford. The two boys both went on missions. The girls didn't. They got, for various reasons, didn't go on missions. Of course, it wasn't popular for girls to go on missions at that particular point. Okay.
Okay. Then after, what did you do after you and Barbara got divorced?
Well, obviously I lived single.
Where did you go?
We were in Sunnyvale at the time, and I stayed in Sunnyvale with the ward there. So I could go to that ward. And Barbara's father came and got her, packed her up, and took her back to Mesa for the kids. Exactly how to say this. I went through 2 or 3 jobs about that time. I was very upset about this, that, and the other, and I decided that I should become a teacher. Okay. So I decided that I needed some psychological help on what to do, what my occupation should be. So I paid a professor at Stanford to give me some tests to find what sort of occupation I would be the best at. And he came up with the following conclusions. I would make an excellent minister. Second choice was a mortician. And the third choice was a teacher. And the absolutely last choice on the list was the profession that I had chosen to go into, a salesman. Absolutely the last choice on the list. So I was glad to know that salesman was not a good line for me because I wasn't happy doing it. But anyway, we decided, okay, the minister is out of the question since I had to earn a living doing something, and I was a Mormon. The mortician took a whole 4 years training to become a mortician, and I couldn't wait to do that. And so the teacher was the next thing that came up. So during this time when I was single, I was going to San Jose State University to get a teacher's degree. When I started college, my dad Ivans said to me, Wilbert, no matter what else you do, get a teaching credential. That way, if the other things don't work out, you can do that. Well, I was just a late teenager at that point, and I predictably didn't do what my father said.
Of course.
I did the opposite thing. I got a teaching credential, and then a little bit later, I so enjoyed going to school that I kept going after I got a teaching job, and got an elementary credential at Hayward State. So I had them both. And I went through 20 years of teaching. Enjoyed it most of the time, although I was a little strapped for cash part of the time. But then they say most teachers are. On that. To get extra cash while I was doing the teaching, I started doing income tax returns. And at one point I was making more money doing income tax returns than I was teaching. However, I was a little hard on the health because you have to working, not getting to bed before 10 o'clock and most of the time before 11 or 12 on that. And it was a hard trial, but it worked.
How did you meet Leela, Mom?
Okay, how did we meet Leela? Well, during this time that I was so busy doing all these things, I was also our stake singles representative for the older singles, and we had an organization going on. It was called the Mormonaires. It was named after a dance group that used to be in the Bay Area, and singles who were 30 or older were part of this group. The young ones didn't come to it. We had our own dances, and we have dances all the way around the Bay Area. One time or another, it would one to another, and that gave the singles a chance to go to Los Gatos and San Jose and meet the girls down there, or the boys, depending on which way to do it. And we even had one or two in Vacaville, and all the way around the Bay Area. We're going to these dances. Well, I went to one of those dances that was in the Burlingame area. And when I went there, I noticed this tall, slender woman who had a lot of class. On the other side, she wasn't dancing a whole lot. She was just sort of ignoring the guys. And so I went over and asked her to dance. Confronted her like that. It looked like she was trying to ignore me, but she couldn't. And so we danced with her, and it was one of those changing partners type dances. So I danced with her just long enough to decide I liked this girl. And then we changed partners. And she got away from me. I didn't get a chance to dance with her again in that dance. So I decided that as soon as that dance was over and we started another one, I beat it over there and asked her for another dance. And she accepted quite readily, which made me feel nice on that. And we danced mostly the rest of the night that way. But it seems that she'd had a very unsuccessful or unsatisfactory experience in an engagement, and she would just as soon have done without men about that point. But I succeeded in changing her mind, and we got married.
Where did you get married?
Well, at that time there wasn't an Oakland temple, and so her father was a person who was very good to the church, but he was not a member. He's what we used to call a dry Mormon. He was a Mormon in everything except that he hadn't been baptized, and he wanted to be at the marriage. And so the stake president thought that it would be all right, and so we had a marriage ceremony in the home for just a few selected friends. And then Lita and I packed up and went to Salt Lake. Drove all the way to Salt Lake to get married there. Somewhere in the process, my temple recommend got left behind.
I didn't know that.
No, I was a little befuddled then at that point. But when we got there, we called, the temple president called my bishop. My bishop wasn't there. So then we called the stake president. The stake president said, well, he could approve it over the telephone, or he could send the paperwork by courier. They didn't have FedEx in those days on that. So the temple president says, well, all right, you've approved it over the telephone. Now you send those papers to me as quickly as you can. We'll need them tomorrow. That's when the marriage is. Well, they didn't quite make it before the marriage, but the temple president had enough faith in my stake president that he went ahead and finished the ceremony, and just we were finishing while the man rushes up with the papers. So we were legally married. That was nerve-wracking.
Eternally married too.
Yes, eternally married.
So then where did you live?
Well, we lived in an apartment house in San Mateo? No, yeah. It was in San Mateo, and then one of Leela's friend's parents decided to take an extended trip through Europe. They bought artifacts and antiques and things like that and made a living doing that. And they had this house just absolutely crammed full of antiques of various things. And so they hired us to babysit their house. And in the meantime, Leela got pregnant. And so we were buying a house across the bay because that's where I was teaching, was across the bay. And she was going to move over there. So we lived in this house for approximately a year for free. But it's quite an experience living with all these antiques, every place. I mean, there was just room to walk in and around them. When they came back and we moved, why the lady of the house said to me, with a few exceptions, you can have any antique in here you want. And alongside the fireplace there was a tile that was about this big, made out of, kind of looked like blue delft, and it had a young shepherdess and a young shepherd getting friendly on this thing. And that was the thing I wanted. I was just turning around to point to it, and she says, you can have, with a few exceptions, you can have anything you want except that one and that one. And it was the two tiles. It seems that they were worth about $50,000 a piece.
Wow.
And my consolation was, well, at least I had good taste. But, so then we bought a house in Sunnyvale.
Union City.
Union City. In Union City. And nice house. We like Union City.
So was that when Bert was born?
Yes. And we went to school. We stayed there until the kids went to school. However, we did have a problem because Bert needed a little extra help in his education. And so we sold the house in Union City and moved to Hayward, where I got a house that had been fire damaged. And I remodeled it, or rather extensively, I might add. But and the Hayward schools were better. Okay, any more?
Well, how many kids were born? You had Bert, and who else?
Well, we had Bert. Well, okay, I guess the people that are watching this don't realize that you're the one that's running this thing. She was the last one. That's Mary Beth talking there. But they grew up in Union City and in Hayward. And things worked out quite well, except for one thing. Mary Beth had a tendency to kind of goof off in school, and we had to move to tougher schools later on so she'd get a decent education.
Well, talk about how that came about. How come we moved?
Well, I mean, man, there's a lot of story here.
Well, it's your life story. What happened with Mom?
Leela, unfortunately, contracted breast cancer. And she died of it. How old were you, Mary Beth?
13.
You were about 13?
Mm-hmm.
When Mary Beth was about 13, she died of cancer. so that left us alone. Mary Beth kind of enjoyed it in a way because she was the lady of the house during that time, you know, the boss. Do it. Things like that. But then I went back to my singles groups.
And how did you meet Evelyn?
Huh?
How did you meet Evelyn?
Well, interesting story there too.
Okay.
I'd been sort of toying with dating this blonde that was a really good dancer. She was a good dancer, but she didn't seem to mind that I wasn't a very good dancer, and I liked that because I wasn't. But she lived in Los Gatos, and I lived in Hayward, and I didn't ask her for a date, and so she told me, "You better come to this Los Gatos dance." So I did. And when I got to the Los Gatos dance, the blonde that I'd come to meet wasn't there. Never did find out why. So I was dancing with people here and there, and as I was standing on the sidelines, I noticed across the room there was this nice-looking redhead sitting there. She wasn't very red then, but redhead. And she was sitting next to another lady that I knew from Sacramento. And so I decided I was going to go over and ask the gal from Sacramento to dance. But the gal from Sacramento had this problem that she couldn't stop talking. She was talking to the woman on the other side where the redhead that I was talking about was sitting. And as I came up, she glanced over and saw me and went back to talking to the other person. That sort of annoyed me. And the woman on the other side was looking at me, and so I asked her for a dance. And I was sort of aimed between the two. I couldn't make up my mind what to do. And so the woman was on the other side, stood up, and I took her by the arm, and we went off and danced. And the gal from Sacramento just sat there with her mouth open. I think she was trying to give me a bad time or something or other. But that was Evelyn, and she and I got together so well that he ended up in a marriage. And Evelyn's listening now, and I better not go any further.
I was in Saratoga.
Okay, it was Saratoga, not Los Gatos.
So then, after you guys got married, we moved to?
We were in Hayward, and the decision was made that Mary Beth needed a challenge in school. And besides, Evelyn wanted to go back to her old house. And so we moved to Alamo or Danville, depending on how you draw the line. And I think the shock to Mary Beth was really, really strong, because this was a tough school that they were going to. I'd done some student teaching there at one time, and I knew how tough it was. But in the long run, everything seemed to work out all right. So we moved from Hayward. I sold my house, invested the money for income, and moved to Alamo. Next.
Next, you guys was on a mission.
Oh, yes. Okay, years later, we retire.
End of story.
Theoretically, all our kids are out of the house.
Everybody was married except for me.
Except for you, yeah.
Okay.
And you finally decided to get to work and graduate.
Get an education.
Yeah, and she did too, by golly. I was really proud of her. But anyway, so we went on a mission. We decided that we wanted to do a genealogy mission, and I always had the direct approach with things. When we decided we wanted to go on a genealogy mission, we wanted to go to London, I found out who was making the calls for that, for genealogy, and I talked to the person directly. and he found out we wanted to go to England on a mission, and so he called the Oakland Genealogical Library, which is a pretty good sized library for those of you that don't know, to find out just how good we were. He must have liked what he found out, because he called us back a little bit later saying there was only one place where he had an opening, and that was at the London Genealogy Library, which was kind of the flagship of the Europe Genealogy Libraries. And could we come next month? Unfortunately, Evelyn had 1 or 2 months yet to teach before she retired from her teaching. And so they wanted us bad enough that they were willing to wait. But we had to send our application directly to him from the stake president. The stake president wasn't sure he was supposed to do that, but he did it on that. So we got called to the London mission. We went there, spent 18 months, and really had a good time doing it. We learned all kinds of things about genealogy, and we felt that we were most useful, and we felt that the Lord approved of what we were doing. Okay?
Okay, and then you came back, and where did you live when you came back?
The whole life history in one short little tape?
Absolutely.
Okay. When we came, before we left, we had made the decision to sell Evelyn's home in Alamo. We couldn't sell it. It wouldn't sell. And finally we decided that, all right, we'd rent a home and then deal with it after we came back from our mission. And so we handed in our mission papers, and right after we handed in our mission papers, we sold the house. A guy came along and wrote us out a check for $500,000.
Oh my gosh.
He was one of these, computer whiz, whatever, he was writing software, and he wrote us out that check, and that's the biggest check I've ever seen in my hand at that time. Okay, now we had this money we had to invest, because if we just paid income tax on a whole $500,000, we wouldn't have we'd lose half of it to income tax. So I won't go into how we did it, but it was all legal.
Okay.
On that. Okay, so we bought a house in San Diego with part of the money. Because that's where we decided we wanted to go. So when we came back, we moved everything to San Diego, and that was a frenetic experience, moving everything down there. Kept it all down there, and we lived down there, and one of the problems with being down there, aside from the fact that the weather wasn't what we thought it would be, it was much colder than we thought it would be, was that we were too far from our children. So we decided to come back.
You are now living?
So we sold our house in San Diego, did that very well, bought a house in Brentwood, California. Now that's Brentwood in Northern California, not a rich housing development in Los Angeles. It's in Northern California. So we bought a house up here on a golf course. We have a lake right out our backyard where we can watch the golfers hit their balls into the lake and speak kind, soft words about the occurrence. And we're really quite enjoying it here. And this is where this film is being taken.
What is your current calling in the Lord? Or what is your current, now you're in your current?
Well, it obviously has something to do with genealogy. I'm the trainer for the people in the stake library. And then I spend one day a week in the Oakland library, working there. In addition to that, I sing in the choir, and course, I'm a home teacher. Everybody's a home teacher. And I'm the Scout Committee Chairman of the Scout Troop.
1929, 2 weeks after the Depression started, so my whole young life was affected by the Depression and then later by the war. Farmington was a small town, and I felt like a fish out of water as I got older. I was the oldest of 9 children and had to spend most of my time helping in the house, take care of the children, cooking and cleaning and so forth. And the youngest 2 children of the 9 were born when I was in high school, so I had to spend a lot of time in high school working after school and on Saturdays at home. My mother and I put up about 2,000 quarts of fruit and vegetables every summer, and she did the sewing and I did a lot of the editing. Most people were poor during the Depression. And before my dad passed the bar, he earned $20 a month as the town clerk. And then he passed the bar and began to practice. And when I was about 6 or 7 years old, we finally got a house that had a bathroom and running cold and hot water. Prior to that time, we had to take a bath in the kitchen on Saturday night with water that was lugged up the hill from the spring and heated on the wood stove. So we felt pretty luxurious when we had the luxury of a bathroom and cold and hot running water and a furnace. And we were quite comfortable, and the house was enlarged. It never was big enough for that many children, but it was larger. Eggs were 10 cents a dozen, and we raised a lot of chickens, and so we'd take the eggs up to the nearest little grocery store and exchange them for some food. But we raised most everything we ate. We only bought salt and sugar and so forth. One time I took some eggs up to the grocery store and exchanged them for some candy bars. But of course my folks were told about that, so that was the end of it. That was the only odd thing I could think of that I did when I was a kid. The Depression more or less ended with the beginning of World War II. There was demand for lots of war material, and Farmington's county, San Juan County, had lots and lots of minerals, vanadium and helium and gas and oil and coal that were all needed for the war effort. So a lot of people were brought in to do the mining and so forth. So the town changed its nature from a small orchard areas to more or less oil and gas town. There were very, very few Mormons when I was a child. We had a little teeny tiny branch. My father was the first branch president, and then he was the bishop, and managed, in spite of terrific odds, to get a chapel built in Farmington. Finished about 1937, somewhere around there, 38. And then more Mormons began to move there. It was not a Mormon town. In fact, there was a lot of anti-Mormon sentiment in that town. They used to tease the Mormon boys really, really badly at school, I remember. And Dad said a lot of people would have turned over in their graves if they'd known their grandchildren were going to marry Mormon girls. Anyway, I got in high school, and I always enjoyed school and did really well at it. And I graduated as valedictorian in 1947 after the war was over. I can remember when Pearl Harbor happened in 1941, and one of my friends, her mother said, "Oh, we can beat those Japs in 6 weeks." Well, in 6 weeks, the Japanese conquered more of the Earth's area than any other nation in history. Most of it being water, but it extended thousands and thousands of miles conquered. And of course, the war took 4 years, and we even thought it might last another 2 years until the atomic bomb put an end to the war. We knew 3 boys who were captured in the Philippines and put on the death march, and only 2 of them came back, and one of them was an Indian. And he said to the white boy's mother, "Your boy was too soft. He couldn't eat the worms and grubs and hardships that we did." The other boy seems to have survived all right. Most of the boys were gone to the war, so fact, I hardly ever dated a boy even from my hometown. I dated through high school a boy from nearby town, Kirtland, just 10 miles away. And then when he went on a mission, he died in the mission field. Meanwhile, I'd gone to college, and I made the mistake of going to a university that didn't have any Mormon kids either. So I didn't grow up around Mormons, and I didn't have Mormons in college, and my roommates weren't Mormon. And there weren't any Mormons to date, so I was dating non-members when I was there in college for a couple of years. Then Dad decided it was a waste of money to send a girl to college, so I went to work, and he wanted me to stay in Farmington. I wanted to go to California. And he says, oh, people just think the grass is greener on the other side of the street. And I said, Dad, I've been there, I know it's greener. And off I went. So I was 19 when I went to Sacramento and got a job and saved up my money to go back to college. I got accepted to the University of California, and I'd been wanting to go on a mission, and they kept telling me I was too young. I wasn't 23 yet. So when I turned 21, I tried again, and for about 4 or 5 months, they lowered the age limit to 21 because of the Korean War. For some strange reason, they put it back up to 23 after a while, even though the war wasn't over. So anyway, I got to go, and I was one of the youngest girls in the mission field there. But that was the first time I ever really felt at home was when I entered the mission. And we had a really, really good time. There were 6 of us girls went to New England all at once, and 3 boys that were from other states that weren't so hard as Utah on the drug board problem. So I had a wonderful mission. I had spent time in New Hampshire first, and then was sent to Connecticut. And I served in Hartford, Connecticut 6 months, and then in Milford, Connecticut for 6 or 7 months. And there we had great success because it was a small town with lots of young families and for housing projects. Before I went on my mission, I had dated several guys that I had met at Berkeley while I was waiting for the university to start. Instead, I spent my money on a mission instead of going to Berkeley. But one of them that I met was Milton Fuller, and one of them I was dating, and he turned out to be as young as I was, and that bothered me a bit. But he was sent to the same mission I was, so we were writing to each other. And then I'd had another boyfriend in Sacramento that I wasn't at all interested in. Anyway, Milton Fuller started writing to me after I'd been out there about 4 months, which surprised me because he hadn't acted interested at all. And then he sent me an engagement ring about halfway through my mission. And so we planned to get married after my mission. I got home in October of '52, and we got married right after Christmas in December of '52. We went to Evanston, Illinois to live while he was at the University of Northwestern, where he was working on his PhD in chemistry. And I worked in an accounting office as payroll clerk. And of course I had access to confidential information. And one thing that really, really upset me was I could tell from the payrolls that women were only getting about half as much as men for doing the same job. And that disturbed me. And I told the boss about it when I left. And anyway, they replaced me. They hired 3 people to do the work I'd been doing. So I was pregnant by that time, and he finished school. I typed his thesis, had to correct the grammar and the punctuation, and I didn't understand a bit of it because it was so technical. In chemistry, I knew nothing about chemistry at all. And then we headed for Berkeley. He had a job at Shell Development Company as a research chemist. And he knew some people who were also Mormon chemists there, and they told us about Pleasant Hill and the new houses there. So we went out one day and found a one house. We bought it right on the spot. And we had no down payment. Interest rate was 4.5% for GI veterans. Mortgage payments were $145 a month.
Oh my God.
And Allison was born in October that year of '56. He had finished school in April of '56. Then in December of '56, we moved into our house in Pleasant Hill, where we enjoyed house with wall-to-wall windows and the view of Mount Diablo, which I always loved. Then, after 3 years, he was unhappy working there, so he went to work for IBM back in Poughkeepsie, New York. I said, well, we can't move to Poughkeepsie, my mother can't spell it. And she did manage to copy my letterheads and spell it, and so she did write us regularly. Anyway, we were there a year, and Milt decided he'd much rather teach school than work in industry. So I said, well, if you're going to teach school, you might as well teach in California, where the weather's better. So he applied and got a job at the University of Pacific for half as much money as he'd been making in Poughkeepsie, New York, working for IBM. So that was a real cut. And he taught there for 3 years. They were taking advantage of him because they were having him teach almost twice as many classes as the college teacher was supposed to have to teach. And one class they gave him was 2 weeks before school started. Well, it was only a week because they were already registering. And they gave him a class on thermodynamics, which is the hardest class in college, probably. But he could do it all. It was hard, but he did it all. And meanwhile, we decided that I would go back to school because that would reduce his insurance worries. That if I had a way of making a living, then he wouldn't have to carry so much insurance. So I started back to school and graduated from the University of Pacific. So here I was, a returned Mormon missionary, graduating from a Methodist college. We had to take an Old Testament class and a New Testament class. The Old Testament class was taught by a Jewish rabbi who didn't believe in prophecy. And the New Testament class was taught by a Methodist minister who didn't believe in the resurrection.
Oh, goodness.
So that was quite revealing to become aware of what was being taught. Of course, I learned that in the mission field already, that they weren't teaching what was in the Bible. Anyway, at that point, we moved to Dublin, and he took a job as a teacher at the University of California, State University of California at Hayward, and was in the chemistry department there for 20 years. And we lived in Dublin 7 years. Randy had been born in Walnut Creek before we went to Poughkeepsie, and Tammy had been born in Stockton while he was teaching in Stockton. And so by the time we moved to Dublin, we had 3 children, and I was still going to school after graduating from the University of Pacific. I went to Hayward to get my teaching credential, and then I went to San Jose State to get my master's degree in history. The best history teachers I had were at the University of Pacific, as it turns out. They were really, really good, and I hadn't been interested in history until I'd taken my first Western Civ class in Stockton. And I walked out of that class an hour later and said, that's what I want to be, a history teacher. And I was 30 years old with 3 kids, and hadn't even known I was interested in history. So I became a history teacher at Chabot College in Hayward. And I taught there and in their branch campus in Las Positas and Livermore. I taught there for 27 years part-time. I had wonderful classes. I really enjoyed my students. It never got boring. I never felt like I knew it all because there was always something to learn, something new, find out about history that always enthralled me, and I'm still reading history books all the time. I'm even rereading some that I've read before, or historical novels I always enjoyed too. After we were in Dublin 7 years, we moved to Danville, and we bought a lot that had a good view of Mount Diablo and had a house built. Meanwhile, Milt had received Fulbright teaching grant to teach in Pakistan for a year. So he left for Pakistan in 71, in August 71. I had been granted the full-time job for 1 semester of replacing a teacher at Chabot College, so I had to stay until January. And meanwhile, I had a contractor arranged to build a house in Danville. Well, we got it finished the night before I was to leave for Pakistan. And so I moved all our stuff into the downstairs room and rented the upstairs before I left. To a couple of later the church down the street they lived. And the children and I, well, two children. Tammy stayed with her Aunt Mary in Santa Rosa, and Allison was 15 and Randy was 13, and we took off to Pakistan. And of course, this meant we were going around the world, which was a pretty exciting experience for us as well as it was for him. And he prepared things for us when we got there. So the kids and I stopped in Hawaii, and then we went to Japan, Tokyo, and we went to see Mount Fujiyama, and it was all softened in the fog. So it didn't seem like except in the airplane. We went to Hong Kong, and then we went to Bangkok in Thailand, then we went to India and Pakistan. In Pakistan, we had an interesting experience. We were in the most primitive part of primitive country, where 80% of the men were illiterate and 96% of the women were totally illiterate. Quite often they could speak several languages because there was no one national language. All various tribes and communities and cities had different languages. So their colleges were all in English because they didn't have any native language for everybody. So he was teaching in chemistry there for that year and had some really interesting experiences because their education systems were so bad. The young people in these classes could memorize almost anything, but they could not solve problems. If he gave them a chemistry problem and a chemistry formula, they could memorize that, but on a test they couldn't take the formula and apply it to any other problem because their culture did not teach logical reasoning and thinking, it only taught memorizing. And in fact, they were not logical at all. It didn't do any good to try to teach them logic. At the medical hospital there by some Scottish missionaries, that they told us that they had to take a Pakistani trained doctor and teach him all over again. They were so badly trained. We did make friends with several Pakistani men who'd married Western girls. One of them had married a girl from England, and one had married a girl from Michigan, and they became our best friends, and they were really, really interesting. It was a cultural shock, much more so than Mexico, fortunately. We had been in Mexico one summer earlier, about 64, I guess, with my folks when they lived down there for 3 years, and we had got used to some of the cultural shock, but if Mexico was 50 years behind the time, Pakistan was 500 years behind the time. The women still wore veils over their heads, totally unseeable. Even where their eyes were was crossed with a veil so that you couldn't see their eyes even. And you couldn't take pictures of the women. We were living right on campus. We were quite comfortable because the American embassy there, the consulate, had arranged for us to get a house on campus with, they got some furniture and some rugs for us there and everything. And then they'd arranged for servants to work for us. And the kitchen was nothing but a concrete shelf with a burner on it, burner on it. And we rented a refrigerator for $75 a month. Nobody had refrigerators in Pakistan to speak of. The climate was very, very hot in the summer, but we didn't actually stay during the summer. It got hot by the 1st of May, though. It had been British occupied for 100 years. That part of the world had been, so the railroads and the libraries and the hospitals and everything were geared to the British system. And of course, they drove on the wrong side of the road as well. The Pakistanis had a war while Milt was there before the rest of us got there that lasted 13 days. They shot each other's airplanes all down and then they called it quits. But they've been hostile with India the entire more than 50 years since they separated and the British pulled out. At any rate, it was an eye-opener for the kids. They had never seen that kind of world. It was so poverty-stricken. They told us not to pay the servants any more than the going rate because if so, they'd have a hard time after we left. So so we paid the butler got $18 a month, the cook $18 a month, and the chauffeur $18 a month, and then the gardener, I think, got $10 or $12 a month, and the other two were part-time, the washerman and the cleaning man. I don't remember how much they got paid, but the butler literally had to raise a family on $18 a month. He took us to his house one time, which was a mud room with one door, no window, with a mud-walled enclosure for the open-air cooking. And I could meet his wife, but none of the men in the family could meet any of the women in any of these families unless they were Western women that had been educated in the West or something. I felt really sorry for women there. You know, it's a bad situation. And it hasn't got any better as far as I can tell from the time I've been there. They couldn't build schools. When the children did go to schools, we saw them sitting in the dirt, making their letters in the dirt with a stick. And they had no books to read. Only the upper class got any kind of high school or college education. And even then, they couldn't get jobs when they got college education because there was no industry. There was nothing that Pakistan was producing that anybody wanted to buy anymore. The quality of their workmanship was dreadful. So, we did quite a bit of traveling, but we found that anytime we traveled overnight, we'd get sick. At least one of us would get sick from the germs because they didn't understand the concept of germs. So we'd take our own food and cook would boil our water all the time. Always we'd take our own food and water and go for the day and we'd be all right. So we went up into the mountains and we could see 23,000 foot peaks from where we were on the campus. The whole area was surrounded by the Himalaya mountains, very, very high peaks. We did take one trip up to Afghanistan on the Khyber Pass. The Khyber Pass was only 7 miles from the campus. They had big signs on the highway, as big as the wall of the room, and it said, "Do not cross this highway after 5 p.m. Do not leave this highway. Do not take pictures of the women. Your life was in danger if you did any of those things." And the servants we had were all from the Pathan tribes that lived across the mountains of Pakistan and Afghanistan area. They were tall and they were light-skinned. They didn't look like anybody from southern India at all. Some of them had blue eyes. They claimed that was because Alexander the Great and his soldiers went through there. At any rate, they also believe they're descended from King Saul of the Bible. And even though they're Muslims, of course, they believe the Old Testament, and they even believe that Christ was a teacher. They are very strict Muslims, by and large. The Afghani tribes were never controlled by the British. Those Pathan tribes were only controlled by Pakistan by bribing the chieftain of the tribe to keep the peace. And they couldn't even guarantee your safety crossing those highways at night. So anyway, when the Russians, after we left, the Russians moved into Afghanistan, and I predicted, there's no way those Russians are going to control those Afghanis. Nobody's ever controlled them. So sure enough, after 10 years, the Russians finally gave up. And then I said, now you watch. They'll fight each other. And they've been fighting each other ever since. So we had a really eye-opening experience of that part of the world. We came back to our new house, very glad to be home. But on the way, we had stopped in Athens and Rome and Karachi. We took off from Islamabad, Rawalpindi in Pakistan, went to Karachi, from there to Athens, and from there to Rome. On the plane from Athens to Rome was an American couple, and they said, "Oh, Athens was so primitive," and we just started laughing. Primitive compared to what? It was, to us, it was modern civilized world when we got to Athens. Anyway, we had a good time there, and in Rome, we went to see the Sistine Chapel. The kids had read the book about Michelangelo's paintings, and they were enthralled with it. And we went to see some of these statues and saw the Vatican and went and listened to the Pope at a Wednesday afternoon open hearing that they held. And then we went to Switzerland to Zurich and rented a car and drove around Switzerland and went up on some mountains on the tramways. Stayed overnight on the side of a mountain with gorgeous waterfalls off in the distance. Wasn't even a tourist area. So then we went to Denmark, to Copenhagen. Then we went to Amsterdam, and then to Paris, and went to the Louvre, and then we went to England, to London. And from London we flew nonstop to San Francisco. So when Randy started school that September, at Monte Vista High School in Danville, the teacher asked him to write an essay about what they did that summer. So he told him about this year trip and about spending the summer coming back from Pakistan. The teacher didn't believe it for a minute. Not for a minute did she believe that. Nobody went to Pakistan. So we started working on the landscaping in Danville and enjoyed the scenery and all. But Randy was giving us trouble and he needed to be in a better school with different kind of friends. So we rented the house again and moved to Pleasanton for 3 years till he graduated from high school. Then we moved back to Danville. And Allison had meanwhile graduated from Danville and had started college at the age of 16. We said, well, if you're going that young, she got out a year early. We said, you'll either have to go to BYU or go stay with your grandmother in Arizona. So she went to BYU and graduated from there in 3.5 years. So she was just barely 20 years old when she graduated from college. Randy went to university at Cal Poly. Cal Poly had one of the best engineering schools in the United States, and we knew he was geared for engineering from the time he was 3 years old. He loved anything with an engine. And Tammy graduated as well from Monte Vista, and she went to the State University at Sacramento, where she graduated and eventually earned her master's degree. By the time the children were all out of the home, things had gone not so well. We had enjoyed a lot of things together. We'd seen a lot of the world. We had gone to operas for 25 years. We had gone to theaters for that many years, musicals and plays. But just didn't seem to have anything in common. And there was a good deal of emptiness there. And finally Neil decided to leave. And he wasn't in good health. And so that left me alone, and the kids were gone. I invited my sister to live with us for a while, and Randy did come back and live for a while. And then my sister insisted I go with her to some of the singles things. Well, I wasn't ready for that, and I wasn't interested in doing that at all. And I had not the foggiest intention of ever getting married, and didn't ever think I would. And but she insisted I go to this day-long seminar, which had some really good speakers, so I went. And then that night she wanted to stay at the dance, and I said, oh, I don't need to stay at the dance. Well, she insisted, so I sat there waiting for her to get through. And that's when Wilbert came and asked me to dance, or I thought he asked me to dance. He held his hand out anyway. So we hit it off really well, because he would talk to me, and I was used to a man. I'd never been around a man that would talk before. And so Wilbert and I just hit it off, and we could talk about anything. We could talk about history, families, and everything else. Food time? So Wilbert wanted to get better acquainted, and came out to my house and took me out to lunch during the week. He wanted to see what I looked like in the daytime. Then I was going the next weekend down to see my daughter. He wanted to go somewhere, and I said, no, I promised my daughter I'd go last week. And my sister dragged me off to this dance, so I was in a conference, so I didn't go. So anyway, I went down there, and then later we started dating some more, and he got really serious. He said, I met him about 2 weeks, I guess. We went to a dance. He said, I'm a family man, and I want to get married again, and I I'm serious about you. And I nearly dropped my teeth. So I didn't give him any answer. I just went off to Utah for a few weeks and thought about it. Anyway, when I got back, he decided he was serious, and I decided might be all right, and so we got better acquainted. We decided to get married in March. End of March, that was in 1985. And he had 2 kids at home, Mary Beth and Bert. Bert was 16 and Mary Beth was 14 by that time. Fortunately, we weren't trying to merge 2 families. People do that, and sometimes it's a little hard, but we didn't have to worry about that, and I didn't have any discipline problems with Bert or Mary Beth. Robert handled everything. So we just really didn't have any difficulty. Bert adjusted very readily when he found out I made homemade bread. And Mary Beth was a little hesitant. I had to tease her one time when she got married and had a stepchild. I said, "You didn't want a stepmother, and now you're going to be a stepmother." And she laughed and said, "Well, now I know how to do it." So it all worked out really well, and Wilbert and I have been tremendously compatible and had good companionship and enjoyed lots and lots of things. So it's been a real blessing in our older years to have all the companionship that we have. So when Wilbert decided to give up teaching, he had his own accounting business for about 10 years. And when we got to retirement age, he retired a year before I did, and then we wanted to go on a mission. We were pretty excited about it. We thought we should do a genealogy mission. We've been working in the Oakland Library as volunteers for 8 years. So we were excited about going to London, and it was a wonderful place to be, and we had all kinds of really, really interesting experiences. Met lots of interesting people. Lived in a horrible little apartment that was about as big as, well, it was one room with a 4x6 kitchen and a fold-down bed. And it gave me claustrophobia the whole time we were there, but managed to survive. When we got back, we went to San Diego County and thought we'd like living there, but we were too far from our kids, and we wasn't happy with the ward there. They didn't have any use for older people. And so we decided we better come back up to the Bay Area. We probably never should have left the Bay Area. If I'd known it was foggy down in San Diego, I'd have never gone there, because I hate the fog. So we bought a house in retirement community in Somerset in Brentwood. I never thought I'd like a retirement community, but I really like this one. It's just very, very, very friendly and pleasant and easy to live here. The only problem has been when we decided to come back, between us we had 5 children living up here. And now that Mary Beth's leaving, we're only going to have 1. Which has been kind of a low blow, but we're going to survive, I guess.